With the ever-continuing release of more and more characters and the new incentive to build them with Imaginarium Theater, before going into Netlin, I wanted to revisit the idea of who are the best characters from each element. I'm going to give my take for the best DPS, support, and off-field DPS for each element, with special consideration to characters that are good and worth building, either for the Abyss, Imaginarium Theater, and both. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. I started off by separating all of the characters in Genshin into their respective element and then classed them to 4 stars and 5 stars. The reason why is because although even free-to-plays will get a lot of 5 stars, to meet the conditions of the Imaginarium Theater, which is a total of 18 characters, and yes, you can borrow some, yes, there are some characters from other types, but you'll probably need around 5 to 6 of any given element. Maybe you can get away with less for an unpopular element if you have more of an element of a different complementary element. But because we can't really predict which elements will go together for each Imaginarium Theater, I kind of want to give like a suggestion of maybe 3 4 stars and 3 5 stars from each element, which really makes you think of how many characters the Imaginarium Theater really makes you build, especially given there's like not that many Dendro or Geo characters, and there's like certain elements like Hydro just doesn't have any 4 stars. It's kind of actually crazy. While other elements have barely any 5 stars, like Electro. Well, I mean, not barely any, definitely, but it definitely has less, especially considering how many 4 stars it has. So let's start with Hydro. Now, although there's only a few 4 stars, I think that for the purposes of Imaginarium Theater, like everyone gets Barbara, everyone gets Hydro Traveler, and your Traveler should be leveled up, whether for the Hydro version or for the Dendro version or whatever, and you can just switch to Hydro for the Imaginarium Theater. So even though Hydro Traveler is really, really bad, it will still count as a character, and most of the time having a dead character here and there in Imaginarium Theater is not that bad because the DPS check, at least for now, is much lower, and it always, in my opinion, should be lower than the Abyss because you can't build optimal teams. Either that, or in the future, maybe the buffs will be stronger. So I'm expecting harder Imaginarium Theater, but I'm also expecting better buffs. So I still think that it'll be possible to use bad characters like Hydro Traveler. So that's always an option to consider. But I mean, when looking at the top 3 Hydros, you're looking at Barbara, Xingqiu, and Candace. And Candace is only good either with Arlecchino Vape or Nilou. She's an okay Hydro character other than that, but still pretty cope. And Barbara is generally good with either Nilou or Farina. So both her and Candace kind of fall on the same level, just very situational. And then Xingqiu is generally quite good. So he's really the only 4 star that's good for both, like a generalistly good. Whereas Nilou and Candace are sort of situationally good, and then Traveler is like good only in the fact that it's essentially just a freebie that you don't have to waste any resources on because you've already probably built your Traveler at least to level 70, which is the minimum requirement for Imaginarium Theater. If the Hydro section wasn't so gosh darn strong and you probably were pulling from multiple Hydro 5-star anyways, this would really be a problem. But the reality is most free-to-plays, everyone should pull Farina. If you're trying to max out your Genshin account, you should have Farina, and then you should either have Yolan or Nouvelette or both. So between Xingqiu, who can be a free character from both the Star Glitter Shop and the Lantern Rite, Barbara, who's a free character, and Travelers, who are a free character, you have your 3 4 stars ready, and then your 5 stars. You're probably picking up these 3 if you're a meta player, and then if you're not a meta player, you know, maybe you're sneaking in a Mona, maybe you pulled for Kokomi, maybe you pulled for Nilou. Nilou from Imaginarium Theater, kind of yikes. But in terms of your top 6 characters for, like, when considering Imaginarium Theater, it's going to be these 6, the 3 4 stars and the 3 5 stars. Nouvelette's also really nice, and Yolan as well, Imaginarium Theater, because they just do so much damage, and both of them are so flexible. And same with Farina, that it doesn't really matter what team it is, what characters you're using, what enemies you're fighting. These are always going to be really good and will basically are some of the strongest characters in the game, so they're going to make it mostly a cakewalk. So strongest Hydro DPS obviously is Nouvelette. Strongest off-field DPS, it's either Farina or Yolan, and strongest support is either Farina or Kokomi, depending on how you want to define support. And then of the remaining, I think Childe is all right if you want to build him for Imaginarium Theater. He wants his best team, but he does work on other teams, and at least currently the DPS check is low. But I think if the DPS check it gets too much higher, he won't be as recommended. I think Ayato for Imaginarium Theater is maybe even a little bit better, just because he is a bit more flexible with his off-field DPS and more flexible rotations. I think Nilou is kind of worse than Childe and Ayato. I think Sejuani is pretty alright, actually, because sometimes you do just want a defensive character, and having just a good healer is good. But the problem is very tied to Farina, and you can only get to, are you really gonna make sure you get Farina and Siege Wing together? And then Mona, because considering she's free, I actually like free if you lose the 50-50. If you consider her as just a free unit that you just end up with, I think building Mona is actually a pretty good idea. This might be a hot take, but I actually think Mona, like, she almost deserves to be more in the 4-star section, and in which case she's like the second best 4-star to build. And I almost want to consider the standard banner characters 4 stars because you get them passively just from playing the game. So I'm gonna say this will be 4 stars, standard 5 stars. Yeah, 4 stars, standard 5 stars, and then limited 5 stars. So yeah, I'm gonna say Xingqiu, Mona, then Barbara for 4 stars. 4 stars. Farina, Yelan, and Novelette, and Kokomi, and I would kind of, and Ayato actually pretty good as well. I'd kind of cut the line off for good for Imaginary Theater at Ayato, but yeah, these 3 are the main ones that you want. So yeah, that's Hydro. For Electro, so we'll move Keqing up here. I say Fischl's probably #1 because she just does free off-field damage all the time, doesn't need ER, doesn't need anything else. Kuki is really good in that she's a healer, but she prefers Hyper Bloom, and if you don't get Hydro, like in the last one, Kuki wasn't nearly as good. Still a good choice. I don't know if Beidou, like I think Beidou is like a really good choice, again, similar to Fischl, off-field damage. You might have to build extra ER, but she still provides some defense. I think Beidou is a pretty solid choice for a 4-star Electro. I mean, Lisa is a pretty solid choice for a 4-star Electro. Keqing, solid choice for 4-star Electro. Man, there's so many. Like, Sethos is decent, but you're kind of screwed if it's not Electro Dendro because he kind of falls off in other playstyles. Electro Traveler, not super good. Sarah, kind of decent because she's at least a buffer. You can at least give an attack buff, and lots of characters like attack buff, I think. And Dory, it's could be okay if it was a different element, but there's so many good Electro 4-stars that it kind of goes low down, and then Razor goes very low down. He's only good on very specific teams. If you already have him built, that could be okay, but definitely not worth building. So I would say this is sort of my general build recommendation. Like, obviously Keqing is above Lisa if you have her, so where would I actually put Keqing? I mean, I think Keqing, with how bursty she is, like, she can be like a sub DPS or like a, you know, just a quick swap DPS for your Imaginarium Theater. She is kind of weak though. Maybe Beidou is probably better, and you can always use Beidou for like early floors or like as a defensive utility. So I think it's maybe something like this. Fischl, then Beidou, then Kuki, then Keqing. Are there really only 4 limited Electro characters? This has to be wrong, right? With looking at how many limited Hydro characters, there's twice as many limited Hydros. That's nuts. Where's the Electros, bro? Holy. For the Electros, I think they're all pretty similar. I think like Sino is basically the worst because he just has the least amount of flexibility in least teams, but he still does lots of damage and he's still fine. Any of them is a really fine. They're so, like, Raiden has the most teams, so like that could be considered the best. Yoimiya, very flexible. Cloran, good raw damage, as long as you have some sort of Dendro, or if it's either paired with Dendro or Pyro. But even if it's paired with Hydro, you can still do some Electrocharge stuff. So she's pretty flexible as well. I don't know, they're all pretty similar. I think I'm gonna put them in this order in terms of like worth itness for Imaginarium Theater. I tend to think that Cloran just is a bit better of a peak character, and Raiden is a more generalist character. So especially for Imaginarium Theater, at least right now, before we get higher DPS checks, and you're less likely to have a perfect team, and you're more likely to struggle for off-fielders. So maybe Yai goes actually ahead of Cloran for Imaginarium Theater, because I feel like off-field characters are more of a premium. But when it comes to Electro, there's a lot of free off-field characters, or 4-star off-field characters, Fischl, Beidou, Kuki, and Lisa, and Sarah, all being good off-field characters. So I think I'm gonna rate it something like this. So best on-field Electro, I mean, it's like a tie between Cloran and Raiden. Cloran having a higher ceiling, Raiden having more flexibility, more teams. For off-field DPS, it's definitely Fischl, and for support, it's definitely Kuki. All right, Anemo. So move Jean up here. Sucrose, definitely the best 4-star as a generalist to build. I think Lynette, you do get her for free. That's a pretty good choice to build up for sure, especially she doesn't need to be level 90 to do her damage. Animal Traveler is definitely an option, also for free. Jean, if you happen to get her, consolidates healing, off-field damage. if Anemo's paired, I think Jean loses a bit of value for Imaginarium Theater because you definitely can't guarantee she's paired with Farina like you can for the Abyss. Still a good character though, because again, the DPS check isn't as high and the healing can, and being off field and being healing can be valuable. Farazan loses a ton of value because it's just harder to pair her with a DPS, and you have to get her for both of the DPS's runs for her to have proper value. You can use her in other ways. Heizo, pretty solid. Sayu, pretty, I don't know. All the 4-star Anemos, 4-star Anemos are pretty darn good to build. Like, you can kind of take your pick. I know I've got Farazan low down. Her value just really depends on, you know, do you have Zhao and or Wanderer and or Shen Yun? I guess because if you do have Zhao or Wanderer or Shen Yun, you want to use one of them or any of them, all of them as DPSs, then Farazan gains more value, but she can only support, you know, one of them or two rounds of one. I think Kazuo is definitely the best. Venti, if you like, I wouldn't wish for Venti for Imaginarium Theater. I wouldn't wish for any characters for Imaginarium Theater. You can always just focus on building up your 4-stars to supplement your account, at least at this point, because Imaginarium Theater isn't hard enough. The only ones that you might have to actually wish for is Hydro. Electro you definitely don't, but Anemo I don't think you do either. Like, you get you can, like, Sucrose, hopefully you have her, but you get Lynette for free. You hopefully get Jean for free. You do get Anemo Traveler for free. Sayu, pretty decent. Yeah, I mean, Sayu, I mean, I guess if I'm putting Jean up here, Sayu's pretty much the same realistically. I guess Farazan, maybe, Farazan also needs C6. Probably most people don't have C6, so we'll leave Farazan at the back because you need C6. Just know that all the Anemo 4-stars are pretty good for this. And then Kazuo number 1. Venti, good for the early chambers, but not really that necessary. A Wanderer, it's easy to pick off the enemies. Zhao does good damage. Shen Yun, I feel like Shen Yun might be the worst. She can be a pretty alright DPS herself, and she can enable someone. To enable someone, you kind of really need to put all the pieces together. Like, you ideally want her with Farina, and you want Bennett to enable a plunge. Like, you could plunge with her, but she's not doing great damage unless you've got C6 Farazan and Bennett and Farina on the team. So I kind of feel like she's like a bad Imaginarium Theater character, like, relatively. I don't know if she's worse than Venti or not, but definitely these 3 are better. And basically it's just make sure you get Kazuo like you already should be having, and then build, you know, this is a good chance to build your Lynette, build your Jean or Sayu. And then if you have Sucrose, great. If you don't, you can go with Anemo Traveler or Heizo. And then if you have Zhao or Wanderer, you can build your Farazan. That's what I'd recommend for Anemo. And best DPS, I think it's Zhao. I think Wanderer can be just as good, but he's really challenging to play, or at least he can be easily knocked around. You can be easily punished. So I think Zhao is generally the best. I think the best support is definitely Kazuo. And Anemo doesn't really have like an off-field DPS damage dealer. I guess it's Lynette or Jean. Like, they really don't do off-field damage. Oh, I mean, yeah, Shen Yun's also a good support. Farazan's also a great support. Farazan makes Kazuo a good off-field DPS. Maybe you could say that Kazuo is the best off-field DPS because if you run like Wanderer, Farazan, you can do Kazuo as an off-field DPS support for extra grouping and stuff. That's pretty funny. For Cryo, all right. So you get Kaya for free, Rosaria, Diona, Charlotte. I really like Charlotte. She applies some good cryos. If you want to do some melt stuff, you can. Kaya, I mean, Chongyun's decent. Layla's pretty solid. We got some, like, Cryo got a lot of off-field DPS, which is really, really good for Imaginarium Theater. Like, Imaginarium Theater actually gives you a potential reason to build Chongyun, Rosaria, and Kaya. I basically put Rosaria, Charlotte, Layla, Kaya, Chongyun up to here in the same, like, these 5 are like the same goodness. Yeah, these 4 are the same goodness, and then Diona and Mika are a little bit worse, and then Fremine even a little bit worse. Oh, and then we've got Chi-Chi, and I would put Chi-Chi around here as well. I think Fremine is all right. I haven't tested him at C6 though, so if you have C6 Fremine, like, that might be better. Like, maybe he's gonna be more of a solid choice. For the limit, definitely Wriothesley is probably the best Imaginarium Theater character, the most teams, then probably Ganyu, then Ayaka, then Shenhe, then Eula. I think this is what I'd do. You could even argue that Shenhe potentially beats Ayaka because being an off-field character, and same with maybe Ganyu because she's an off-field character. Like, you can, like, that gives you more flexibility on who your on-fielder is, because at least for me in the Imaginarium Theater, what often happens is I'll have a bunch of DPSs and it's harder to fill in the extra spots. So, but Ganyu can do off-field. Risley's just a good generalist on-fielder. Shenhe is an off-fielder, and she just needs to pair with any Cryo character or a bunch of Cryo characters, and she can add value to that team. I think Ayaka's extra damage might be more worth it. I don't know. I'm kind of equal on these two, and then Eula I feel like is the worst. Physical really needs a buff. They really need to rework physical resonance or give her an off-field DPS / physical buffer that goes with her. It's still fine. Like if you have Eula or you want to build Eula, you can still make it happen, especially for Imaginarium Theater. But if we're comparing the Cryo characters, that's where I think it's at. I think similar to Electro, like you really don't need to wish for Cryo characters for Imaginarium Theater. There's lots of good 4-star options and even free options, right? You've got Kaya, you've got Chi-Chi, and then you're gonna have some of these Cryo characters. So many Cryo 4-stars. And yeah, I know Aloy's here, but she's definitely not a limited 5-star, so she's gonna go up there with the standard. Best DPS, I think Risley, best DPS. Best off-field DPS. Either Ganyu or Shenhe. I would count Shenhe as an off-field DPS, even though she's more of a buffer. I guess she should be a support. Best Cryo support is going to be Charlotte or Layla. Probably Charlotte. Layla's pretty close. And best off-field, I guess it's Rosaria or Shenhe or Ganyu. That's hard. That's tough. For Pyro, lots and lots of Pyro characters. You're not hurting for Pyro. So obviously Bennett is free. Xiangling is free. You get Amber, but you're not going to be building her. If you have a Chevreuse, I mean, she only works really for the Pyro Electro. But I mean, you should be building her anyways just because she's so strong. I think Toma's pretty good nowadays for like a generalist support, especially for Imaginarium Theater. I think Yanfei is a pretty solid choice because you don't actually have to level her that much for her to bring value with Shield Fei. So that's actually pretty good. Chevreuse is pretty good. If you have a Gaming, it's pretty good. He's definitely a better choice than Diluc to build. Even though Amber's free, I don't recommend building it. There's just so many good Pyro 4-stars. I would say it's something like, I would say the value is something like this for Imaginarium Theater 4-stars. Chevreuse would be higher if you could guarantee there'd be always Electro with Pyro. She still does stuff outside of that. She can still, you know, do some stuff, but actually kind of no. So yeah, but Gaming still does some decent damage, but he kind of really wants certain comps as well, and Diluc even more so really wants Shenyan, so that's worse. Hard to match them up together. So yeah, I think it's something like this for limited 5-stars. Oh, and then Dea's over here. Dea's also actually a really solid choice as like a support. Imaginarium Theater is a place where Dea can provide some value without feeling too bricky. You just don't want to have like too many of these Pyro supports because you're probably not going to need all of them. But the nice thing about Yanfei is that she can kind of do both, so that's pretty cool. For limiteds, I think Arlecchino is obviously the best, being she can be like a quick swap DPS, like a duelish DPS, or just carry the entire team because she's so strong. The rest are pretty much equal. They're all DPSs. All the limited 5-star Pyros are DPSs. That's actually crazy. This is so interesting. I'm really glad that I did in this format because you can really see patterns start to emerge. But yeah, all the limited Pyros are DPSs, and you guys still think that the Archon will be a DPS, huh? I mean, I get it. They've all been DPSs so far, so you could make that assumption, but there's no way. They got to release a Pyro support at some point. I'm still of the mind that it's going to be a Bennett Xiangling combination upgrade. But yeah. So we got Arlecchino. I think if I had to put someone second, maybe it's Linny, because he can just work as like a generalist character. Then maybe it's Hu Tao for numbers. Then maybe it's Klee because she's better, kind of generalist, doesn't need Hydro. It's like if you've got Hydro, then Hu Tao's better. But Linny and Klee don't specifically need Hydro. And then yoimiya is the worst. Still alright, but being fully single target I think really hurts Imaginarium Theater when usually AoE except for in the boss chambers. So yeah, I think yoimiya is the worst. Best DPS, it's obviously Arlecchino, but Linny's really good too if you can manage to not hate yourself while playing him. Bennett's obviously best support, and Xiangling is best off-field DPS. Chevreuse honorable mention for support, obviously. Yeah, that's Pyro, pretty easy. I guess for the newest players, I should talk about what each one does. Arlecchino just does insane numbers. Bennett provides a massive attack buff and heals. And Xiangling does amazing off-field DPS and Pyro application. I think I talked about why the other ones were good. Ganyu's great because she's an on-field DPS and an off-field DPS with her burst. And then Risley generalist off. I did say that. And then I think I explained the 4-star. Charlotte heals. Layla shields. Kazuo grouping. I think I explained these ones pretty well. I think I explained the rest. For Dendro, so 4 stars and standard banner 5 stars. I mean, definitely Dendro is kind of easy because Curara is free this patch. So at least if you're watching this somewhat recently, you should probably be building Curara. Yao Yao is always free, so probably building Yao Yao. Kale is free. Dendro Traveler is free. And then Tighnari is great and free if you get, lucky and get him as a Lost 50/50 or standard banner character. And then Kave is just really bad. So yeah, I think that's the Dendro 4-star situation. You really can't go wrong building them. You might as well just build them, especially given that there's literally no 5 stars. Like, we're getting Emily, yeah, and you should have Nahida, so you should be building Nahida. But basically, like, this is one where you could build Nahida and then build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Dendro characters from the 4-star standard pool and not wish for Baiju or Alhaitham. But either one of these are going to be great for Imaginarium Theater. Alhaitham can be very flexible, generally needs Electro to be good, so it's like if it's somehow a Dendro Imaginarium Theater that doesn't have Electro, I guess that's a good positive for Chlorand as well, because there probably is always going to be Dendro and Electro together, except that there just wasn't, right? There just wasn't. But either there's Electro or Pyro, I guess, but that was kind of rough for Alhaitham to not, well, no, because he had Electros, never mind. But yeah, either Alhaitham or Baiju, both are good choices to wish for or build. And then yeah, any of these 5 Dendros, that's easy. Best support, best off-field DPS. I mean, Nahida's the best support, and she's currently the best off-field DPS. I'm sure Emily will be the best off-field DPS because Nahida's main focus is support, not off-field DPS. Best on-field DPS. I mean, obviously it has to be Alhaitham, but Tighnari is solid too. But Baiju is a great support. Curara and Yao Yao are good supports. Kale is a really good support for specific teams like Nilou, and Dendro Traveler, a solid generalist, all right support that you can just build. So yeah, Dendro. I'm gonna put Tighnari. If you have Tighnari, right, like he can be really quick swappy and really good. So I'm gonna put him up here in terms of worth building on the ranking. And then finally we have Geo. I think this is the one that most people are like the most scared about. It's like, what the heck are we gonna do in a Geo Imaginarium Theater? Like, I haven't wished for any Geo characters. What the heck? But I mean, you get Noelle for free. You get Geo Traveler for free. So at least that. You probably have a Ningguang. Maybe you don't, but she's a pretty solid character for Imaginarium Theater because I'll hopefully be making a Ningguang guide soon here. She's a solid character for Imaginarium Theater because she can do on field, but it kind of sucks. But you can use her just like a quick swap burst and skill user, so that's pretty good. I don't really love Yunjin because her synergies are very limited. Not very many characters use just normal attacks, and her buffs aren't really high enough to compensate for how limited that is. And then Goro, probably the worst, because it's probably going to be really hard to make a mono Geo comp here, which definitely makes Zhongli the best. Chiori pretty good, Navia pretty good, Albedo pretty good, then Ito probably the worst. I think most free-to-plays should get Zhongli at this point. He's really good with a bunch of teams, really good for comfort, really good when you need Geo, either in the Abyss for like Wolf Lord or Geo Hounds or something like that, or for now the Imaginarium Theater. I think Navia is generally a better pull than Chiori, both for Imaginarium Theater. Yeah, both for Imaginarium Theater and for the Abyss. But Chiori's pretty solid, and then Albedo obviously you should never wish for because you have Chiori that you can get. But like, if you lose your Albedo, if you treat him like a standard character and you lose to Albedo on like the Chronicled Wish, then hey, that's okay. You can build him then, and that's actually probably worth it for the Imaginarium Theater. Then Ito, I just find it's going to be very hard to build like the mono Geo, like build a good comp for him. But that being said, he still does really good raw damage, and he's still going to be solid for the Imaginarium Theater. Yeah. So best DPS, Navia. Best off-field DPS, Chiori. Best support, Zhongli. Very easy. And then your top 6 Geo characters to build, I think, are right here, but I don't think you wish for them. I think you can get by with just these 5 Geo characters, and then just use another character from another element if you don't want to wish for Geo characters. But Navia is definitely a good character to wish for. Again, I don't recommend wishing for characters for Imaginarium Theater yet. If you want to see a full list, let's zoom out so you can do a screenshot if you want. So each one is ordered. Yeah, I don't recommend yet for wishing for characters for Imaginarium Theater. It's just not hard enough, and we do have enough free and 4-star characters that you should be able to scrounge together a team. And hopefully this gives you an idea of who is looking good to build. And let me know if this was helpful. Let me know if you want to see different types of content to help you with the Imaginarium Theater next time. Let me know your thoughts. Take care. Bye for now.